Oh, there we go. Hey, you
I
guys,
see
Kirsten
you
Morley
live.
here. Kirsten Morley here, your emotion code body code practitioner. I have Sarah Lavonne here. I'm super excited to introduce her. So she is a board certified labor and delivery nurse, certified childbirth educator, and birth coach, also known as a doula. And she helps pregnant women and their partners decrease their anxiety about childbirth and parenting so that they can actually have the confidence and have a positive birth experience. Sarah actually draws from the over 5,000 births that she was a part of during her nursing knowledge and during her practice or whatever, during all of the
My
nursing that she
life.
did. Yeah. And her passion for education and heart to actually serve and provide childbirth and specialty education and support services to different families. So her dream is that every pregnant woman would have access to a fun, like, which is awesome, super fun, and up to date, reliable education, and to support so that they can actually have the birth experience that they actually want. So she actually believes that education is like the most important thing and the key, and is key to a healthy birth memory and parenting journey. So she has worked with hundreds of postpartum women and helps make their transition to parenting a little bit more realistic and meaningful and a lot more successful. So thank you so much, Sarah, for being on here. I really appreciate it. So
Thank you for having me. This is so fun.
you are actually one of my favorite people to follow on Instagram just because you are just so real and so raw, and it's just awesome. So please just tell us about your story and how you even got interested in becoming a labor and delivery nurse, and then what made you become a doula, and then also now an influencer because you have such an influence over so many women. So
how sweet. Well, it has been a lifelong journey, let me tell you. I kind of blame my parents actually for my somewhat obsession with birth because I was present at my sister's birth when I was 5. So my mom
that's
had
so
some like
cool.
really progressive doctor that was like, yeah, it's a family affair. And so they like, I remember them talking to me about it and prepping me that my mom would be yelling and that like, she's in pain, but it's going to be okay. And so I actually was there and I remember it pretty vividly, as you can probably imagine as a kid.
Yeah,
And
for
I
sure.
remember feeling so calm. And my mom, like, she did not have an epidural and she was making some noise when my sister was coming out. And I like looked at her and was like, I know you're okay, mom. Like, I was totally calm, no big deal. And so I think there's always been a fascination with pregnant people, a like just kind of almost like overwhelm with how amazing our bodies are, that we can create a human out of practically nothing and birth it and it be us today. So
Yeah,
it started very young. I felt called to nursing like in early in high school, like probably sophomore year of high school. I just was like, I think I should be a nurse. I love people. I love helping people. I like the like mental challenge of science. I think the body is just fascinating, and that for learning for me was easy. And so
yeah.
I just kind of was like, I'm going to be a nurse. And that just kind of like fell in place for me, honestly, not knowing at all what I was getting myself into for nursing school. Because if anybody's been through nursing school, you want to die the whole time. It's awful. It was like one of
Yeah.
the harder things I've ever done in my life, but we made it, thank God. And it's definitely worked out for me.
Yeah.
But so I went to nursing school. I actually grew up in South America. So I was born in Minnesota and then grew up there and then in Ecuador. So I graduated high school in Ecuador, in Quito. And then everybody, when we graduated, I went to an international school and most people went to college in the States, and it was just better schooling. So I went to California, where I currently am. I'm actually in Minnesota because my sister just had a baby like last week. So I'm here now, but I live in LA. I know. So I'm an auntie now, which has been so fun. And he's like the cutest thing in the entire world. But so went to school in California, went to nursing school. Through nursing school, I really loved every rotation. But when I hit labor and delivery, and I knew this, like even my professor was like, come over to labor and delivery. They'd send me to postpartum. She'd be like, come on back. And I got so much experience in labor and delivery. And that's where I was just like, this is the best. And especially when you're comparing like specialties in medicine, a lot of the specialties are sad. and you deal with end of life and you deal with sickness. And I worked at Children's Hospital of Los Angeles through nursing school. And it was like, I had a 13-year-old die in my arms. And I remember thinking like, this is not how I want to spend my life. Like, I believe that it's for somebody else,
What?
but it's not for me. And so I think there was a draw to happy nursing, but also just the like magic that happens in birth. And so I knew I wanted labor and delivery, graduating nursing school. I happened to get hired directly in. There was like over 900 applicants and for 2 spots, and I got one. Thank God. So
yay, that's
I was
awesome.
very fortunate to be in nursing school, started in labor and delivery, and then that's all I've ever done as a nurse. So, and I remember walking away crying my first day and being like, this is horrible. There's no way I'll ever be able to do this. They do 5,000 things at one time. And then also being like, I have found my life's calling. Like at 22 years old, I know what I'm called to for the rest of my life, which I know a lot of people like say that, they go through multiple careers. And mind you, I have sort of gone through multiple careers, but all in the realm of birth. So did nursing, started as a nurse, and then about a year and a half in, realized I would never pay off my student loans unless I did something different. And so I got a second job, and I was originally in East LA, which is lower income, mostly Spanish speaking, which was awesome for me, totally my demographic. But I wanted to be challenged. And so I got a job at Cedars-Sinai in Beverly Hills, where all the celebs deliver.
Wow.
And
that's
so
awesome.
talk about like the difference in environment, but it was really good for my own learning and really pushed me. And so eventually paid off my student loan, started full time at Cedars-Sinai just because I was tired. And then started teaching childbirth classes there. There was 8 of us selected to revamp their childbirth program. So we sat in a room for 4 months and completely redid the curriculum, learned to teach, and started teaching childbirth ed, started teaching all their specialty classes. Eventually it moved into being a peer mentor. I just got the best delivery, guys. I'm living my best life. Excuse me. My brother-in-law just dropped
awesome.
Hello,
mother-in-law.
Exactly. I'm like, thank you. So I'll be cabinet for you. So I actually developed their peer mentorship program because education's always been my thing. And I was finding myself, I was precepting new nurses. And then when they went off orientation, they were pretty much coming to me and asking me questions about things. And if there was emergencies, I was finding myself helping there. So they pulled me into a more leadership role, and I developed a program to oversee all of them. And then I took over the childbirth and parenting education program at Cedars-Sinai. So I was managing that program, had a team of I think like 18, and we were doing the thing when I quit in October of 2017. And as you can tell, I had done a lot of things in the birth realm, and I like to learn, I like to grow, I get bored kind of easily, and I learned really quickly. And I just had felt like I was just like, not all of my gifts are being used here. Like, I know in management, I was finding that like, wow, I'm really good at this, but I was missing the bedside, and at the bedside, I felt like, but I have this whole skill set I'm not really putting into practice. And so I was really at unrest and even thinking about a career change and just kind of like, what in the world? But they say that there's 2 ways to make change. I say this all the time, from the inside out and the outside in. And I felt like I had done everything I could from the inside out. And I was seeing so much need and so many opportunities and having all these creative ideas that we could fill to really change the world. And I was like, it's not going to happen here. So I founded Bundle Birth, a nursing corporation, officially in January of 2018, where that led me into like thinking about, first of all, if I was pregnant, this is how the social media stuff started. If I was pregnant, what would I do if I had a question? We all know this. We go to Google, right?
YouTube.
Right, exactly. So I went to Google, and on the first bar was a bunch of YouTube videos. And I'm like, oh, childbirth ed, what do we got? And no offense to this very sweet, solid educator on YouTube, but there was like, she was older. It was a tripod at the back of the room. And it was like, welcome to your childbirth class. And today we're going to talk. And I was just like, oh no, like I could do this. I know myself. I can keep people engaged. I have a big personality, and like,
you do. I love it.
And so, it's the real thing. I get that all the time. Like, you're just so normal, because a lot of birth people are kind of kind of hippie, kind of like, you know, not quite, a little more crunchy than I am, you know, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's just not my personality.
Yeah.
I'm a nurse by background. So, so I was like, well, I could do that. So that was the plug for YouTube, mind you, not knowing at all what I was getting myself into. And then I just was like, I was always jealous of the doula relationship. And when I thought about nursing, unfortunately, nursing in the United States right now, we are just constantly being bombarded with more to do this, do that, being yelled at by doctor. I mean, it was just like, all I wanted to do was care for my clients or my patients. And it was like, I'm handed another patient here and go run and do this. And it didn't allow for me to really give the care that I wanted to give. Plus the continuity of care where like you meet somebody for 12 hours and then bye, and that's it. And I didn't like that either. I like the relationship building, and I like the consistency, and I like that there's somebody that actually follows you throughout your pregnancy into postpartum. And so that piece of being a doula was really appealing to me. It always was. I always said, like, knock on wood, if I lost my nursing license or something, like that I'd be a doula. And little did I know, you can actually do it without losing your nursing license, thank God. So I am still a nurse. And with bundle birth, I have kind of pulled all of my background into my little baby here, where I offer all sorts of different education related to birth, pregnancy, postpartum, and then offer one-on-one doula services. Mind you, I am able to offer my nursing licensure, like my background, and I can offer nursing services through bundle birth. So it's like I say, it's doula on steroids, where you get the doula and then you also get the nurse. And then really my specialty is the hospital birth, that helping families really feel confident in the hospital. I know that like there's a lot of fear in the hospital. There's a lot of mistrust with providers, and you know, people are, I don't want to be tied down and I don't want to be told what to do. I want to make my own decisions, which is like, you're right as a human being. And so that's really what I love doing with my clients, and helping them navigate situations in the hospital and helping strategize conversations with their provider, where I'm like, I know what you want. I know what they're saying. Say it like this and you'll get what you want, and they'll think that it's what they told you, you know? So that kind of strategy is really fun to me, of now being able to function in the hospital sort of, but independently, and now fully 100% give all that I can to my clients one-on-one. And then now it's virtually too. So I have clients all over the United States. I just talked to somebody from South Africa yesterday who's looking to hire me. So it's, when I think about reach, my dream has been the world. And so I'm seeing that happen, which is so fun. And then through social media, you asked about social media. Lord knows, I'm very long-winded. So feel free to cut me off if this is getting too long.
No, you're good. You're good.
With social media, I had seen that whole YouTube thing and kind of gone through the process in my head. And I had said, there are like probably 5 topics that I know that I'm going to get asked a lot by my clients. And I feel like if I did them on YouTube or threw them out there, other people could benefit, but then secretly I could just send them my video, and then I don't have to do the repeat work of saying my spiel over and over again. It was really making my life easier. And then I threw a few videos on YouTube and just was like, ugh, like, this is so much work. YouTube is like, you have to be very committed. And to be honest, I wasn't in the beginning. I was like, we'll see what happens. But then, so I kind of fell off. I was trying to get my business up and running. I was just working on other things to like, I have to make money, you know, I got to pay my bills. And so I found, this is super interesting. I was teaching a childbirth class in the community in LA. And after the first break, this guy, or actually prior to the first break, there was a doula in the class who had found one of my videos on YouTube, and she came and she was just proctoring the class. She's like, oh my gosh, I've seen you on YouTube. And I was like, oh my God, what? And like, at this point, I think I barely monetized. Like I maybe had 1,000 subscribers, and like my top video hadn't even hit 20K. Like I was not on YouTube like I am now, you know? And so I was like, oh my gosh, like, oh, that's embarrassing. And so, but she gets up in front of the class and she's like, oh, I'm here because I love Sarah. She's on YouTube. And I was like, die. Like I was not okay with it. I was like so embarrassed. And I was like, no, I'm not a YouTuber, like whatever. So after the first break, this guy comes up to me and is like, hey, like you're on YouTube. And I was like, oh, yeah. And he's like, well, if your class is anything like what you are on YouTube, like you're going to blow up on YouTube. Like you'll do well. And I was like, oh, like, thanks, whatever. He's like, no, I work for YouTube. And I was like,
what?
okay, wait, tell me more. You know? And so
Yeah.
actually he came alongside and was like, I'd love to do a little bit of a cervix exchange and I can just guide you and push you and give you tips on YouTube. And I was like, yeah, for sure. Now, mind you, most of that was Sarah put out another video. Sarah, where's your next thing? Sarah, what are you doing? Because there was a 4-month hiatus. And in that 4 months, one of my videos hit 20K. And I remember being like, what? Who are these 3,000 people? Like, that's the Rose Bowl, like, what in the world? Like, people care. And then the comments start coming in and people are telling their stories. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's actually helping people. I should do another
That's so
video.
cool.
And honestly,
Yeah.
it's only until recently that I've been like, okay, I guess I like am sort of on YouTube. So
Yeah, for sure.
that
That's
was the
so
journey.
amazing.
It's been like one video at a time. And then Instagram honestly was just like, you kind of have to be on Instagram if you're doing any kind of business. And so that even has been somewhat of a surprise of like, it's been honestly fun for me business wise to see a platform grow organically, and there's people that pay for followers and like, for me, it's been like, what do people want and what do they like? And then learning that I do these little drawings, these like animated, like educational drawings, and those have been really popular. And I think probably
I find them so fascinating.
Right?
They're so
Well,
fascinating.
and the funny thing is, some of that, like the what is labor one, I have been drawing at the bedside on the whiteboard in my nursing patient's room since White Memorial, my first job. Yes. Like I would draw the circle and erase the cervix and like draw the da-da-da-da. I've been doing that for years. And so I was like, oh, this is so it's been so fun for me to see it pick up and really like be encouraged that like you can make a difference through social media. I think I haven't been the person that's like, I want to be somebody, like I just want to help, and for me, the motivation is very much when I'm seeing the impact and I'm getting the DMs of people literally who've delivered 15 minutes before writing me that like, I did it, Sarah. And I'm like, what? Enjoy your baby. Like, right later. But at the same time, I'm like, oh my gosh, like you felt that connected and that grateful for something that I did and the effort that I've put out there to really make a difference in their lives. So,
oh my gosh. I mean, I was also, I was so inspired by you when I had my third baby, just because I already told you this, but during my second baby, I had a C-section and it didn't go as planned. It was nothing like crazy. Like his hand was just coming out first and they're like, actually, we're going to, and I was just like, no. But then, because it was a healthy C-section and everything was healthy, during my third baby, I was just like, you know what? I do not want another C-section because I was hell. It was awful. It was so bad. And so I found a doctor that helped me. And because of you actually is the reason why I felt so empowered, because like I had the information, I had all the things, all the videos, and you were like, just do this and this and this and talk to your doctor about this. And I was just like, okay. So I did it. And I was just like, oh, so just because of you, I was able to go do a VBAC. And it was just like the coolest thing ever. So I would actually love to know.
You talk about the power of social media, like, and really like doing something to make a difference. Like I'm sure there are other stories out there that I have no idea. And that honestly, that keeps me going because it's a lot of work.
I believe it. So anyways, so what is the biggest challenge that you felt like you've overcome? So whether this is like in your personal life or your work or just like this entire journey, what's the biggest challenge that you feel like you've overcome? And how did you get where you are today as far as like the challenge? Like you know what I'm asking.
Yeah, I do. And you mentioned that question before, and that's the one that I'm like, oh, where do I start? I think for me, some of the bigger challenges, which there's been a bunch, especially in recent years, I think moving overseas was a big one as a kid, but I don't know that I like overcame that intentionally. I was so young that like that just kind of happened and fell upon me. So I wouldn't necessarily use that. But I think for me, all of the challenges have built a resiliency and a resourcefulness that I have learned that like those two things for me are such important characteristics to have for life as life skills. And so, oh man, how do I choose? I think maybe some like major betrayals from some close people in my life. I think, and that could be work related. That was a best friend. That has been ex-boyfriends. You know, and I think, I can't believe I'm actually going to share this. I hope
you don't have to.
No, but I mean, whatever, like this is how we all learn from each other. So I had a best friend, and you know, things went south, and it was mostly jealousy related. I think that it ultimately comes down to that. She was seeing my successes and like my little wins, and wanted a piece of it. And I think for me, the betrayal and the abandonment and just the like, how could people put themselves before what we have as a relationship, you know? And that goes for ex-boyfriend. I've been cheated on multiple times, you know? And so it's like some of my closest friends, ultimately, I have trust issues, you know? And I think when you've been betrayed that many times, and it's like my script is that people will leave, that their own selfishness or their own humanity will get in the way of them just being able to be happy for me and let my gifts flourish and let me be successful, whatever that looks like. And to me, it's like, I'm nowhere near where I want to be. I'm just one day at a time. But I think overcoming my own trust issues, I think for me, the biggest lesson has been that people are human and that forgiveness is foundational. I forgive my ex-boyfriend and I forgive her for the hurt, but you know, I've never been more betrayed. And so there's like that fine line between like forgiveness and love. Like I still love her. I love her family. She will always be a part of me, but at the same time, setting boundaries for myself and learning that like people they live their own way. And I can't assume that everybody is going to be having my best interest at heart. So it's that fine line between protection. And for me, I've always been an open book. I to a fault will believe the best in people. And I still think I do that. But I think the lesson for me has been, you know, how do I self-protect yet still and build that resiliency in relationship and not just shut off in friendships or in any kind of meaningful relationship, and yet trust, but maybe not to a fault, you know, and to say, I don't feel comfortable with that. And that was ultimately what happened with this relationship. I set up a boundary and she didn't like it and kind of went a little crazy about it. And so, you know, that to me, it's like, I think I feel really much stronger now in setting boundaries for myself, in protecting my business, in protecting my own heart. And also knowing that I am okay, that no matter what happens around me, that my core is complete in itself. And honestly, in my faith, that is a huge piece of it for me. And that no matter what happens around me, that I'm going to be okay. And that I could speak to with any hard thing that I have gone to. But I think that that's been a journey to get to be that like confident in who I am and who I'm made to be and in my giftings, and just being like, you know what, this is what I'm called to. And sometimes God brings people into our lives for a season and out for other reasons.
I totally agree
with that, and letting go of some relationships has also been challenging, but like really good for me because I'm such a people person and I want to be friends with everyone. I want to be on good terms with everyone. And so how to like end still having good terms, still loving and caring about the person, but also setting up that boundary for myself.
Yeah, for sure. That's
I don't
so
know if that
good.
made any sense.
No, it did. It made perfect sense. I feel like that's how for me personally, it's been so there are times in my life where I've had people come into my life and they like walk all over me. I'm like, I'm sorry. And then I kind of like, once you step back, you're like, okay, I think like this is not good for me anymore. So I'm setting a boundary. And if you don't like it, then you're not respecting me, you know? So I totally get
and that
that.
comes to self-respect. I think I was bullied as a kid, and you know, I've connected a lot of my like I'll self-sacrifice and almost self-sabotage for other people, and especially when you're in a helping career. And you know, I really enjoy helping other people, but it's like at some point I'm learning that like there comes a point where like it shouldn't be to my cup being emptied. Like I should be full enough that I have enough to overflow. So when people take or when I'm giving, it's not to my detriment. And that's where like I've had to be okay with that and be okay with like, you know what, this relationship is really it has sucked me dry.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So that's exactly how I feel about all relationships. So, you mentioned that you love to teach women. What is one thing that you love to teach besides the flex and flow? Like I already know what that means, but please tell everybody what the flex and flow is, and then also what is your favorite thing to teach as a doula?
Yeah. So I think flex and flow, we'll start there. Flex and flow actually comes from Ecuador, and from growing up, I hosted short-term teams. So teams would come down from the States or Canada, and we would like receive them, and I would host, debrief, orient, translate, facilitate their experience in Ecuador. And in Ecuador, especially when you're dealing with North Americans who are pretty regimented, pretty scheduled, pretty organized, and kind of expect if it starts at 7, it's going to start at 7, and you're disrespectful if it doesn't start at 7, you know?
Right.
Whereas in South America, that is not the case. Time is very fluid, and just the ability to do certain things like you're flexing and flowing. And so the idea is that being flexible and going with the flow is a life skill. And so it started there with the fact that like, you know, I say this all the time, like we'd go to the grocery store and be like, oh, I need beans, and there'd be no beans, just nothing, or milk or eggs, you know? And it's like, all right, well, flex and flow, or you know, I guess my plan was to do this, but this is closed for no reason, and flex and flow. And so that has been a life skill that I've carried on, that like when you're being faced with something challenging or when things aren't going as planned, to be able to say, all right, how do I be flexible and how do I go with the flow? And how do I really recognize where I'm at now and what my options are, and then navigate positively in one direction or another. And that for labor, birth, and life is a life skill, because as we all know, no labor goes exactly like you picture. It's what's fun about my job, and no labor is the same. And so it's almost like you have to take what's in front of you and go, all right, what do we have? And what do I want? And how do I flex and flow in this scenario when it's not necessarily going as planned or as you dreamed or as you thought? So that I use all the time. And that's my symbol. If you're like, I'm talking to you, I'm like, flex and flow. Even my friends are like, I get it. Because I say this in life constantly. So definitely that's one of my foundational things. If people don't get that, they have to get that for their labor and birth. And that's honestly probably the one thing I get DM'd about the most, is like, wow, flex and flow is such an amazing tool for me in my labor and birth in this way. So that's number one. Number two would be one of my favorite things to get across is the idea of control. And when we look at birth satisfaction and even life satisfaction, like we all want control, right? And they say there are 3 things that contribute to birth satisfaction. One is you never felt alone. So that's where your support people comes in. That's where one of my roles is, but also a partner or a friend, whoever's there with you, that you made all the decisions for yourself, that it wasn't, they imposed upon me, they took over and I was a victim to the circumstance, right? And then that you felt in control. And all of us, labor is very out of control. You know, you can't tell your contraction when it can happen, or you're like, hey, my water broke. Oops, stop. That's not a thing. And so there's a lot that can feel very out of control and can lead to a potential trauma, etc. And so the imagery I always give is the hand picking up the sand, and that we can pick up sand and there are things we can control, meaning what we can hold in our hand. But ultimately, and we can squeeze and try to hold on to it. And actually, you're probably going to hold less sand. You're going to have less in your control if you squeeze it so tightly. But instead, if we can lift up the sand, hold loosely to it, and let the sand that we can't control fall to the wind and trust that it goes where it needs to go, and then focus on the sand that's still in our hand, which are the things that you can control, you're going to feel like you have some control in a circumstance that maybe it is a little bit out of control. And that to me carries on for parenting, carries on for life, that like there are things we can't control. And so let's focus there. I gave the analogy, and this is a new one, that I'm all about word pictures. So when you're walking through a field, like your birth or whatever circumstance you're facing, starting a new business, having a kid, parenting multiples, whatever, that your birth is like a flower field in front of you, right? That it can be this beautiful, like life-giving, colorful thing. And when you walk through it, you can either open your eyes and say, look, there's flowers everywhere. Look at the sun. I'm warm. I'm not too hot, too cold. This is gorgeous. Or you can look down and go, wow, there's a weed there. I need to go there. And wow, that's like an ugly patch, or that flower is dying, you know, and be really critical about your experience. And so that to me is kind of like that element of like, you choose where your focus goes. And that's something you can control. And if we're focused on the weeds, we're going to miss the beautiful birth experience that you have in front of you in that flower field, or that life, whatever lesson that's in front of you. And so focusing on the positive in all of that is really important to me. And I love the transformation that happens when they're like, we can control this. And you know what? I'm going to let that go. And that to me, like, can carry on forever, potentially.
Yes, absolutely. I totally get that. So what is one thing that these pregnant women, or just people in general, what is one thing that you have found to help get rid of the anxiety when it comes to like the birthing, or when it comes to like just life in general? How do you actually help women stay calm during, like, especially the times right now, just like with COVID and everything's like crazy? And how do you help people feel safe?
Mm-hmm. Honestly, education and support. So everything is harder when you do it alone. And so I think whenever you're navigating anything, whether it be COVID or having a baby or a hard pregnancy, whatever, that when you feel isolated and alone, or postpartum even, like Mommy and Me is one of my biggest recommendations. Like if you're feeling isolated, anxious, alone, not okay, get out there and get in community with somebody else, you know? So support, having a network around you, having that person, that's where like I feel like bundle birth can fill that role, you know?
Yeah.
And then education. I think the unknown, the number of times in the hospital that patients would come in completely overwhelmed. What is happening to me? I'm like, a contraction. Like, we're starting basics of education, okay? And it's like, and I see this too of like, oh, that's what it is. Oh, that's normal. Oh, that's whatever. I think when you fill in the gaps rather than going in blind, it's like, I know exactly what to expect. And there's a spectrum. Like, you don't have to know every possible detail of all the things that could possibly go wrong. And there's some people that like that. But to have a basic understanding, have taken a childbirth class, have done some research, even for you with your VBAC, like you added education to your brain. And guess what? That empowered you to have a positive VBAC experience, right? And so to me, it's like, ask the questions, get the answers from a trustworthy resource, and fill in the gaps when you don't know. And it's like all the unknown becomes way less scary, even in coronavirus land, you know? And then surround yourself with the right people, AKA the right support, to make sure that you don't feel alone. And it's going to completely transform your experience. That's why I've dedicated my entire life and career to it.
Right. That's awesome. Well, it's probably time, just because we're a little over time, but that's okay, because I love hearing from you. You are such an inspiring woman. I am so grateful that I was able to interview you, and it's been so fun. And so I want to, for those people on my Facebook and YouTube, where can people find you on your different social media platforms, and how can they get a hold of you? And if they are interested in the bundle birth classes and everything, please share with us how they can get in contact with you.
Yeah. So easiest way is bundlebirth.com. I have online classes there. They're on demand. I have a VBAC class. I have coping with labor, infant safety, and CPR. There's lots of things. I do one-on-one calls with people. I have a whole birth coaching program. And then, of course, like the virtual doula style or in-person doula thing, depending on COVID. So bundlebirth.com. On social media, I am at bundlebirth, easy. And then online on YouTube, it's just youtube.com/Sarah with an H -Lavonne. So it's just my name. If you just put in, honestly, if you put in bundle birth in the YouTube search bar or Sarah Lavonne, you'll see me. So perfect.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. It has been such a pleasure to do this. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.